Hello, Tom Maguire. I'm going to review this book today. The fantastically titled Variable Valve Timings by Chris Harris, Memoirs of a Car Tragic. Now, I've got to admit, I first saw this book on the shelves in Asda quite a few months ago. I glanced down and I saw his little face there looking up, and I thought, Chris Harris has got a book, that's good. And I saw Variable Valve Timings and I actually thought to myself, I almost did a bit of an eye roll to myself and thought, what the hell kind of a title is that? And I can't quite believe I did that, because I'm an absolute car geek, a complete and utter car bore. I have a good set of friends, but I've never had a single friend in my life who shares my passion for cars. So it's very much something that I've just always been kind of like on my own with, but I'm fine with that. So the fact that I thought the title was a bit shit is kind of weird when I look back at it, but it just kind of, I don't know why I thought it, but I've gone back and I actually listened to this book on Audible. It's narrated by Chris Harris. He's got a great voice, to be fair. He's very entertaining to listen to. As I always say, when the book is narrated by the author, it does tend to feel that bit better, I think. And the other thing as well, if I'm being pernickety, is when you're listening to an audiobook, particularly I listen quite a lot in the car because I travel up and down the country for business, for my work. You need someone to read it in a way that is clear, and that might sound silly, but my cars are fairly quiet when I'm going along on the motorway, but some books are difficult to hear the voices of. It's just, I don't know if it's a quality of recording, or I think it's quite often the type of voice the person has. Well, Chris Harris has got a brilliant voice for it, and it just worked out really well. It was lovely listening to this book. So I just found there was so much stuff in this book that I could relate to. I almost felt like he was some kind of a long lost brother in some ways. No, but seriously, I think he's probably about 7 or 8 years older than me. But the way he describes his kind of childhood, the way he developed his interest in cars, his obsession with car magazines and car data, then how he became a car journalist, all that sort of stuff, right through to Top Gear to where he is now, I could just relate to almost all of it. So this book review is going to be a bit of a funny one because I absolutely massively enjoyed it as a car geek, car bore, which I'm more than happy to admit. What I'm trying to work out is, would people like this book if they weren't that way inclined? And I think some people really would, actually. I think the way it was written was really quite lovely. The way he talks about his family, his parents, his upbringing, his kind of school days, uni days, all that sort of stuff was just really interesting and really nicely told. And so I think even if you're not a massive car bore, you're still going to get something from this book. And particularly, I think the audio version is really nice just to listen to if you get a chance. So many things that he talks about that I could relate to. His obsession with car toys. Even now, my daughter, I buy her miniature cars. I got her a Porsche the other day and she's like, Dad, Porsche. She absolutely loves it. I've got an old Cayman S, which I absolutely love. I've got a Mini Cooper S as well, which I love. A Peugeot 3008, which for me is just a great family car, and just for putting the miles on the motorway is just perfect. So I love cars. Old Father Christmas bought me a copy of Top Gear for my 10th or 11th Christmas, I think it was. And I basically became obsessed with car magazines since then. I think it was version or copy 2 or number 2 or edition number 2 of Top Gear. I remember it had a red Honda NSX on the front, and I just devoured that magazine. And I just learned all the statistics in the back, all the 0 to 60 times and the insurance groups and all that sort of stuff. And Chris Harris talks about a similar thing. And that just developed my interest. And he talks as well, this is a personal development channel, isn't it? And I talk about books and what we can get from books and what I've got from books and how I can pass those sort of tips and things on to you. And he talks very much about his own education and how he couldn't be made to be interested in certain things. I think it was maths he talks about. And he makes the point that if the teacher had taken the time to look at what his interests and passions were, then they could have used cars and statistics and things to help him and to develop those skills, which I think is really, really important when it comes to our own personal development, isn't it? You need to find what it is you love, what it is you're passionate about and that makes you tick. And then you often find that you will fly with that because you're just interested and you're therefore more obsessed and focused, and you will crack on and do a good job and learn that way. So I think there's actually a lot of personal development advice in this book as well, to be fair, if you look at it a certain way. But it is just really entertaining. He talks about his mum, how she was an ex-racing driver and she used to get into races with people and she'd irritate blokes who she'd overtake and all that sort of stuff. And I love that because my mum wasn't an ex-racing driver, but she was quite quick in the car, and that used to really interest me. My dad had a Subaru Impreza Turbo when they first sort of came out in about 93, and she was driving it, and I remember being on the dual carriageway and someone went to overtake and I was like, "Go on, mum, don't let him do that." She puts her foot down, leaves this bloke for dead. And about a week later, got a letter in the post. He was an off-duty policeman. He was pretty pissed off. All sorts of different things. I can remember getting her to drive through puddles in a Discovery we had one time, which just basically went right up the hedge and pretty much crashed. All sorts of stuff because the brakes were so terrible on those things. Crazy stuff. I've forgotten half of it, but it's so good. So what he says on the back here is, what defines the car sado condition is not being able to recall a time when the toy car era of your life actually ended, because for us sufferers it never does. I couldn't agree more. I was talking to my wife Siobhan earlier about getting a Skeletric for the kids and stuff at Christmas, and we've just spent so much this year I couldn't justify it, but I have got little corgi cars and Hot Wheels sets and stuff for them, which is going to be brilliant. I didn't realise, actually, someone told me the other day that Hot Wheels, people actually set them up in their garages and you can just like set up really long tracks and make them go for ages, so I'll look into that at some point. Yeah, he talks about being adopted and how lovely his parents were, his privilege, the schools he went to, his dad having BMWs growing up and how lucky he was to have that. You know, my dad had some lovely cars, never anything crazy, but he had like, what did he have? He had a Renault Clio Cup Sport 172. He had a 206 GTI 180 at one point, which wasn't quite so good, but it was still nice. It had bucket seats and things in it. The Subaru, he had a Mazda 323 GT when they came out that was in Laguna Blue, which was like the only one in Cornwall at the time, which is where we live. All sorts of different stuff. He loved Citroens as well, loads of Citroens. He had a Citroen Diane years and years ago, and I remember being in that as a kid, and I remember when he sold that and I was devastated. I was probably only about 4 or 5 years old, but I was gutted of him taking that down, you know, seeing it drive off down the road. So yeah, just so many things that I could relate to. My first car was a 205 GTI, which I managed to quite dodgily get hold of. I probably won't incriminate myself with that too much, but you know, let's just say I was pretty desperate to get a car. I passed my test as soon as I was 17. It took me about 5 lessons. I was absolutely desperate to get driving. I managed to get hold of this 205 GTI. Absolutely fantastic. Took on all the boy races in it. Never crashed it, like miraculously. I don't know how. But he talks a lot about French hot hatches from the 80s and 90s and how good they were. And it's just so lovely to hear all that. I remember taking that car into school and just like yanking it around in the car park and getting it up on 3 wheels, and like everyone just being really impressed and just driving like an idiot. I used to go to car dealerships even as a 17-year-old and just pretend I was interested in buying a car and just get one out on a test drive. Brand new Ford Focus and stuff when it came out, and just take them into school, handbrake them in through the entrance. Just used to absolutely love it. Chris Harris is obviously a really talented driver as well. I want to talk about Top Gear as well, because Top Gear was something that I absolutely loved growing up, and I do think you cannot beat Clarkson, Hammond and May, and I know lots of people find that really boring. But to be fair, I was pleased to see Chris Harris on there because I knew that he had come from Evo magazine. I loved Evo magazine as well. I think he is a character. He is a car nerd. The other two are cool as well, to be fair. I quite like both of them. Paddy McGuinness and Flintoff are cool. And it is quite funny, but you can't beat Clarkson, Hammond and May. You just can't. They're just so inappropriate. Apologies, I ran out of space on my phone then for a second. Yeah, so talking about Hammond and May, they're all absolutely fantastic. But I do think that Chris did a pretty good job of stepping into some impossible shoes there, basically. And he talks about in the book how so much hatefulness online from trolls and all that sort of crap. And I just think, what sort of an idiot does that? You know, of course, Top Gear isn't going to be the same without those 3 legends who kind of like started it and made it what it was. But just roll with the changes. They decided to leave and go and do something else. And so I was quite glad to see Top Gear carry on in some form, you know, even though it wasn't going to necessarily ever be quite the same. But I think he's done a really good job, and I'd like to see them come back at some point if possible. I think he's great. I think you see him on YouTube as well, so look him up on YouTube. He does loads of different videos, testing different cars, some fantastic cars. He's a brilliant driver, makes road testing very interesting. There's so much stuff in this book that I intended to talk about. As I was going through, I was thinking, my God, that's something else that I've got another story about. That's something, pretty much everything he said, I had my own almost version of, which sounds a little bit weird. But yeah, I don't see the point in particularly boring you too much with that. It's a bit too self-indulgent really, but he loves Porsches. I love Porsches. I don't have quite his finances, unfortunately, but my Cayman is something that I absolutely love, and I just think it's just so, the handling is just so delicate and mechanical and lovely on that car. I just really, really enjoy it. Yeah, so I'm absolutely passionate about cars, and like I said at the very beginning, I literally have no friends who share that with me at all, so it has been very much a lone kind of interest my entire life. I kind of bore my wife with it sometimes and she'll just laugh at me. To be fair, she likes cars, so luckily I'm a little bit supported in that respect. You know, she's not anti me having nice cars and things like that, because she'll enjoy a nice car, but she doesn't have the same appreciation of handling, you know, and performance figures and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I won't rant on too much more, only just to say that I think this is a really good book. I do highly recommend it, even if you're not into cars necessarily. Consider giving it a go. Have a look at Chris Harris's videos on YouTube. I think he's great. I hope I've done a reasonable job reviewing this book, because this is one of those books I was listening to and I was thinking I've got to try and make the effort to do a really good review on this one. And yet I find myself just putting the camera on and just improvising as usual. So I hope I've done a decent job on it. Please like and subscribe. Yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think, good or bad. As I always say, I'm not scared of negative comments. If you want to comment, that's fine, no problem. I'm just interested to see what people think. Thank you very much. Speak again soon. Cheers.